All right. Welcome all. Thank you for being here this morning, this afternoon. My name's Sean. Uh, just want to acknowledge and offer some some gratitude for folks taking an hour out of their day to be with us. I'm excited for what we'll be sharing. Hope it's meaningful. Hope it's useful. Um, And yeah, prepping for this, hard to kind of name and acknowledge the time that we're in today. And don't want to minimize it, and also don't think I can, give give full acknowledgement and appreciation for what it means that folks are here with us and taking the time. I can say I think the work that we do matters more today than it ever has. And yeah, just grateful that folks are excited about this and willing to um, share an hour with us. So um, gonna kick us off uh, with quick introductions. Got to move all my screens again. Uh, Pathways of Social Impact. You may be familiar with them, maybe not. And yeah, maybe heard of as Pathways of Public Service and Civic Engagement. We published the book in October. Been about a four and a half year process. Uh, and yeah, kick us off if this is folks' first Campus Compact webinar or first exposure. Just quickly, Campus Compact envisions a world in which higher education commits to advancing equitable, accessible, and just democracy, where colleges and universities serve as responsive and transformative agents of change, with students, faculty, staff, and administrators joining as true partners with communities and contributing to our collective flourishing. Campus Compact supports, engages, and challenges higher education to realize its public purpose. Um, Want to do a quick check-in with folks in the chat to see your familiarity with the Pathways framework, and if you've heard of the Pathways, using the pathways. This will give us a little bit of a gauge on how to shape our presentation with you today. So, if you would just put in the chat if you're learning about the pathways, if you've heard of the pathways, if you're using or using extensively, it'd be great to got some familiarity, heard of it. Couple twos, learning about it today. Excellent. Excellent, excellent. All right. We've got a couple. I think the average I'm going to say is a two, which is fantastic. Glad you're here. Glad you're excited to learn about it. So great. Pathways of Public Service and Civic Engagement. It's a framework and a tool. Primarily, the idea is to have meaningful conversations with students about how social change happens. So there are six pathways. Um, and the idea is not to necessarily make these dichotomies. The idea is to give emphasis and give focus on the ways in which we can make social change happen. So, community engaged learning and research, direct service, policy and governance, community organizing and activism, philanthropy, social entrepreneurship, and corporate social responsibility. I always like to share my sort of entry into the Pathways framework. I was a young faculty and staff at Salt Lake Community College. I started teaching a civic leadership course. And I really wanted to teach students about activism. I really wanted to teach students about community organizing. And I felt a certain sort of vulnerability in doing that. And I was exposed to the Pathways framework at a conference, and I thought, oh wow, this framework gives a sort of menu in the ways that which we could talk about how social change happens, and how to support students. And I brought my own bias into that, and I really only wanted to talk about community organizing and activism. And so I would gloss over, direct service. I would gloss over policy and governance, um, and really lean into this idea of organizing and activism. And after a couple semesters of using this framework, I started to really appreciate how much it changed the scope of conversations, right? Bringing my own biases in, I thought philanthropy, well, that's a thing that rich folks get to do to other people, right? Or direct service is this sort of like band-aid approach. And after a while, and after engaging with this framework, I realized that each has their own kind of merit and has their own, value in the full landscape of how social change happens. So, um, just moving. The book has three sections, and you can visit the online companion to see the book launch and the webinar we did in January about the practitioner profiles. So the practitioner profiles are a way to really kind of expand the empirical base of the pathways. Knowledge, skills, attributes of each of the six pathways, and really a way to help students think and to think about your own programming, your own courses, and how we want to build in these areas. What we're going to talk about today is two current uses from Stanford University and Utah Valley University. Um, and really excited to get to hear the ways that these are being used, the ways that they have been used, and then the third section is the theoretical, empirical, and critical reflections. So this is sort of the forward thinking, how the pathways framework might contribute to the field of community engaged learning, and the things that we think are really urgent to be thinking about. So this is my favorite part of the of the book, is getting to highlight all of the amazing folks that have contributed to it, made it possible. You see the authors here, practitioner profiles, current uses. We're going to get to hear from Cassie and Summer and Kimmy and Luke today, and then the reflections section. So. This is, quite literally my proudest accomplishment, is to get to say that, I played a role in uplifting, the amazing work that these folks are doing. So, the practitioner profiles that I mentioned, I just want to kind of emphasize one of the challenges and one of the goals here is to highlight the distinctions without creating these dichotomies, without separating. The profiles are very much meant to be emergent, and generative. We don't, pretend that this is the last word on any one of these profiles, but rather a starting point for future work. And I also want to emphasize the amount of thought that has gone into avoiding the sort of partisan divides here. I will never omit that my own politics obviously show up in the work that I do, and certainly believe that everyone's politics, have a right to show up in the work that we all do. And what we don't want is, this to turn anyone off from the idea of them seeing themselves as change agents and actors of building the world in which we deserve. So profiles, I mentioned you can see the recording online, um, and great. So we're gonna dive in. We're gonna get to hear from Stanford here in terms of how they're using the Pathways framework.
Thanks, Sean. So my name is Kemi Oyewole, and I am presenting with Luke Terra. I'm currently a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Pennsylvania, but I got connected with this project when I was a graduate fellow at Stanford and getting to live in this wonderful living learning community we'll talk about. And Luke can introduce himself more, but he is the resident fellow there along with his other job as the deputy director of the Haas Center. So I'll let him go ahead.
Great to be with you all. Luke Terra, Deputy Director at the Haas Center for Public Service at Stanford, and serve as Resident Fellow in Otero, the Public Service and Civic Engagement Theme House that we'll be talking about at Stanford. And any residence that includes Frosh has a Resident Fellow, which are staff and faculty who support academic learning and personal development for our students.
So we're going to share a little bit about our journey creating environment in Otero where we could share the Pathways framework and get students introduced to it. So I'll give an outline for our talk. Sean, here we go. So we'll start by introducing the frameworks that we use, not just Pathways, but there's a few others to inform our learning and work in the house. And then we'll describe how we sought to meet the needs of a wide array of students in the house through a track structure that offered multiple entry points to service based on students' interests, availability, experience. And then we'll recount the development of a course that we introduced to introduce students to these pathways of public service. We'll give a hint at some of the student leadership opportunities we've had related to direct service, and then update you with some of how the program has changed over the past, I can't believe it's 5 years now, and some of the questions that are still bubbling among our team. So living learning communities, they're students who live together and are sharing an academic and residential experience around a theme. So we are the public service house, but there's an energy theme one, there's ethnic theme houses. But again, they aim to combine these academic and co-curricular elements. And there's been great success with these living learning communities, enhanced belonging, student leadership, appreciation of diversity, willingness to dialogue, especially for first generation students. And so we sought to bring those best elements into Otero, and we'll talk a bit more about the academic components here, but it's definitely a holistic experience living with folks while we're learning. So hopefully you'll see some of those non-academic but co-curricular threads throughout.
And just to give you a quick overview of Otero, the Public Service House. So we're a community of 78 undergrads with 44 Frosh and 34 upper class. So 44 first-year students, 34 sophomores through seniors. We're in our 5th year as a 4-class house. However, the public service theme predated our time in Otero. It had been an upper class house, predominantly sophomore house, for about a decade prior. Tom Schnabel, former executive director of the Haas Center, had been the resident fellow for about 11 years then. So long history at Stanford, but what changed as it came into this new iteration was expanding to include first-year students, which we learned made a big difference in how we designed the program, and we'll share a little bit about how we responded to that. As Kemi mentioned, we're not the only academic theme house. There are 7 at Stanford, and an additional set of ethnic theme houses. So lots of theme environments, but not every student chooses a theme. It's an opt-in kind of a model. So it's for students who feel drawn to a community that integrates their residential experience with some academic area of focus, ours being public service and civic engagement. As Kemi mentioned, we use a set of frameworks to guide the program structure. The pathways of public service and civic engagement is a key one, but we also integrate the Stanford principles of ethical and effective service. You see those there: humility, respect and inclusion, reciprocity, preparation, safety and well-being, accountability, evaluation, and learning and reflection. The principles within my kind of day job at the Haas Center, the principles underpin all of our programming, from curricular to co-curricular, student leadership, student organizations, summer internship experiences. All students who participate in Haas programs are exposed to those principles. And so we also include them as a key kind of foundation in our theme, curriculum, and program. We have a set of cultural humility practices. Just a really quick set of cultural humility practices that we think about in the design, especially of the Pathways course, that we'll talk about: practicing critical self-reflection, recognizing dynamics of power and privilege, and building inclusive and accountable structures. And then we think about the cultivation of civic identity, and that's that top left. And so thinking about how to support students as they form and deepen a sense of civic identity as part of their time in the house, and in a way that prepares them both for their future at Stanford. Typically, students are only with us for a year, so we're thinking about how a year in residence with us can be an inflection point for future engagement. And so helping students to be reflective of their civic identity is a core part of that. So these kind of in total form the kind of theoretical framework that we bring into the structure of the house.
Thank you. So as our first year in the house, we continued the model that had existed previously for students who were past their first year at Stanford. So they were a bit more oriented, ready to jump into a year-long service commitment, and they had some more orientation to Stanford, the Haas Center, and the like. But when we integrated a wonderful cohort of first-year students into the house, we realized that there was a need for a bit more differentiation. And so after our first year in the house, we connected with students and asked them a bit what they would like to see in thinking about the theme and how we learn about it. And so from these focus groups with students, we had a few themes that emerged. One is broaden their understanding of public service, and of course the pathways do that well. Also thinking about the context of serving as a Stanford student in the Bay Area. That local knowledge is important, especially for students coming from very different geographies and backgrounds. And then also holding this critical dialogue in a community of service, right? So discourse from different backgrounds. And then we sort of thought about, how do we offer these different entry points? And so it's divided into 3 tracks. One, which is a more preliminary, the engage track. So at least 3 touch points each quarter, whether it's events, pathway sessions, service learning experiences, trainings, or service. But again, sort of a drop-in kind of experience where you're learning, engaging, but maybe not as in one commitment for the whole year. And then the sustain path, which thinks about making a 3-quarter commitment to an issue or organization, and then also having a regular quarterly dinner to sort of reflect on these learnings. And then the lead track for folks who are more experienced, not only ready to make a year-long commitment, but to make a leadership commitment and pursue coaching, one-on-one coaching with Haas Center staff. All the students do a kickoff at the beginning of the year to introduce them to the frameworks and ideas. And we have spotlights as well. So in addition to these tracks, all students were now taking, but at different points, it's been optional to take a 1 to 2 unit course called the Pathways of Public Service. And so it's a weekly class. The sessions are an hour or 2 hours a week based on if students take it for 1 or 2 credit hours. And the topics are aligned with student interests and campus events. So we try to make it a part of build off community needs and the broader campus community. At the end of each course, session, students complete 50 to 100 word exit tickets. So just synthesizing their learnings there, making sense of them, and contextualizing them with their own experiences. And then for students who are interested in more of leadership learning, they take this 2-unit course where there's more credit hours and more external work. But again, introducing them to each of these pathways. And so we have some examples of some of these class sessions. So for example, one that sort of introduces the topic and a question, direct service, where the topic was, under what conditions is direct service ethical and effective? So sort of raising some of those conflicts that can come with, if it's a drop-in kind of service model, what are those tensions? Thinking about social entrepreneurship, which some students hadn't thought of as service in a traditional way. So how can impact investing offer solutions to climate change, and bringing in a climate change investor to talk more about that? Or charity and justice, how do we resolve the tension between meeting immediate needs and addressing root causes of social problems? And then some local context, the history of Stanford and East Palo Alto, bringing in elders and policymakers from East Palo Alto to talk about those relationships between Stanford and East Palo Alto, a historically disadvantaged community, and then advancing Polynesian culture in East Palo Alto. And we brought in Anamatangi, Polynesian voices, and they're pictured in that slightly small image there, but to think about historically marginalized groups and their relationship with the campus, and then housing in the Bay Area. So introducing pathways, introducing dilemmas, and also situating that in the local context.
When we first started in the house, we had the kind of program theme content just sort of sprinkled throughout the quarter, but not organized as a credit-bearing experience. And we found that delivering it as a course has just held a number of advantages for us. So that move was really helpful in sustaining conversations around our theme over time and ensuring that students could really commit the time and brain space and capacity to digging into the theme together. So it's really been a great addition to our program. In addition to the course, which is offered fall, winter, spring, students are all required to take it once. They can take it all 3 times. We have alums who come back and continue to take it. It's open to people outside of Otero as well. In addition to the class, we also offer a number of service opportunities lightly connected to the pathways as a way to help students explore in real time and out in the world some of the topics and questions that we think about and talk about in our pathways class. So the way that has kind of matured over the last couple of years, we now have monthly regular volunteer opportunities, and I'll come back to that in a minute. And then we also have RA-led kind of one-time opportunities. And that's in part to give our RAs an opportunity to step into leadership around the theme and bring issues and topics that are motivating to them to the larger dorm community. But in getting feedback, we had started just with some of those one-time events, and we got really great feedback from our residents saying they really wanted to have ongoing service opportunities because they felt, as we would want them to, a little conflicted about just kind of airdropping into particular communities for one-time service events. So though we think one-time service events are an important and helpful component of a service program because it exposes and introduces students to new issues and organizations they just don't yet know about and communities that they're not aware of. We wanted to balance that with opportunities for ongoing commitments so that as a dorm, we felt connected to and committed to particular communities and organizations with whom we could partner over the long haul. So the way that looks now is that there are 2 monthly service opportunities with our ongoing partners. One that's a youth serving organization on the coast side, kind of close to campus, that does outdoor and environmental education, and we do farm chores every other Sunday. If you're in the Bay Area and you want to join us, come on, and you can milk some goats and take care of the animals. And then the second is with an organization serving the farm worker community in Half Moon Bay, and we support their food distribution program once a month there. Outside of that, we try to tag on to events and opportunities that are already present so that we're channeling students to things that exist rather than trying to always just populate the calendar with new stuff. So a few key highlights, we always do the MLK March. That's an amazing community event organized in San Francisco on MLK Day every year. We support the Stanford Powwow and use that as an opportunity to think about Stanford's relationship with Native communities. And then our RAs bring to the fore all the kinds of passions and commitments that they have and introduce those into the House. We're planning a fundraiser for Minneapolis nonprofits next month. So we try to curate a broad and diverse set of service opportunities, again, hopefully that touches on different pathways as a way to just help give students an easy introduction and opportunity to connect with issues and organizations they might want to continue to work with. And lastly, great updates and challenges. Anytime when we write up a chapter, it sounds great, and it is great. It's wonderful. We love it. And things continue to evolve. So even as I, reread the chapter that, as Sean said, that was like a 4-year project. We've learned a lot in those 4 years. And so a number of things we've continued to grow and evolve in. One of those, as I mentioned, was to make the class now a requirement rather than a recommendation. And that actually came at the urging of our staff, our RAs, who said, really, like that needs to be just a foundational part of what it means to be an Otero. And no argument for me. I just didn't want to ask too much of students, but if they gave us permission, we were excited about it, and the students have risen to it. As I mentioned, one of the other good learnings was just about the importance of curating both one-time and ongoing service opportunities. So we continue to get feedback and try to tweak the program to better represent students and respond to student interests and needs. Challenges, and these may be familiar for those of you who work in living, learning community spaces or are just thinking about what this might look like in a residential setting. In our own context, recruiting upper class students is tough because we have a very, broad residential education context where students can get, basically one-room doubles all the way to like furnished apartments. And so trying to compete with the different residential offerings and communicate the value of a living, learning community experience for our juniors and seniors is always a challenge. Service restrictions on international students. That was something that I really wasn't aware of until I got into this. And our international students were a part of our community, and we would be curating service opportunities. And they helped me realize just what restrictions they have based on their visas and trying to think creatively about how they can be civically involved while staying within the boundaries of what's permissible. On versus off campus. This is a classic problem for any of you involved in public service related work. There's the convenience of having students connect with things that are available on campus, and contrasted with the logistical complexity and the time that it takes and everything to organize off-campus things. So just how to balance both giving students easy access opportunities to on-campus ways of engaging in public service issues versus the importance of just helping them get, as we say, beyond the palm curtain of Stanford's campus. Recurring opportunities versus responsive. So we have these organizations and commitments that we try to make over the long haul because we think that that's an important value proposition for us and kind of ethical stance that we want to take. And as we all know, in this world that we're all in, there's a need for us to be responsive to the moment. And so trying to balance that sort of being planful and intentional about what we're curating for students while also being nimble and flexible to respond as things in the world change. And then, as Kimmy mentioned, one of our goals is around cultivating critical dialogue in a community of service, supporting ideological pluralism in the class and in the House at large, especially as the world around us is dealing with some really complex issues, continues to be, it's not something that we ever just get right. It's just something that we continue to try to calibrate towards in supporting students in deepening their engagement with each other and living in community as they're trying to live into their commitments to these larger issues and organizations. So you could sort of take those as invitations for conversation and questions that come up later, but just wanted to end with that. And with that, Sean, you can let us know where we are on time and if we want to open up for any questions or comments right now, or if you want to hold.
Yeah, absolutely. Welcome question, comments. The palm curtain is a new one for me. That's I had not heard that, and I appreciate it having visited Stanford campus. So
yeah, you gotta if for anybody who's been to Stanford, you know what that means because we literally have a road that we call Palm Drive, which is just a giant palm curtain that runs right down campus.
Yeah. As soon as you said it, I could see it. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, welcome. Questions, comments, reactions, anything from folks with us today.
Hmm. Yeah, so the dialogue thanks David for the question, dialogue around ideological pluralism. So there's a couple ways that we try to do that. One is that in all things that we do, we want to spotlight and lift up expertise that is present on our campus and in the community. We want to be careful not to try to step in as experts when others really hold the expertise that we can take the opportunity to introduce our students to. And this has been an area where we know that we've got a lot of great colleagues we can lean on. So one of the ways that we approach that, every quarter of the Pathways class involves some skill building around dialogue. And we've got a few great programs on campus that have really focused on that. One is there's a program that is available, I think, to all campuses. It's called this Intercollegiate Civil Disagreement Fellowship Program. It's a consortium of universities that support and build skills among their students for civil disagreement, which I love. And they do. What's great about it is that for many of us, it can feel like our specific campus community is kind of an echo chamber. And so they bring together diverse institutions so that students from Stanford are talking to students from a range of different institutions in different geographic locations. And so it actually helps to model the kind of pluralism that they're trying to build skills around by bringing in a more diverse set of students. We bring those student fellows who spend a year in training to lead a skill-based session for our students. A second effort on campus is called the Institute for Belonging and Intergroup Communication, IBIC office, and we bring them in to do a training. And they do an activity like, for example, an activity like crossing the line, where they kind of have statements and everybody needs to organize themselves for or against those statements and then give voice to why, as a way to just model both taking a principled stand on a controversial and challenging issue, and then also listening to and engaging critically but thoughtfully with the different views of others. And also as a way to just visually reinforce how, even within a community that one might think is kind of ideologically harmonious, there's like lots of difference of opinion. And so we do things like that just to kind of help build that skill and muscle with our students. And then second, it comes up in our RA training. One of the things that we really focus on is this notion of conflict resilience. That's kind of a focus of both our staff training and staff preparation, and also the work that we do in the house. That's really outside of just the theme. It's really about how you live together in community, and conflict resilience, this notion that conflict is not to be avoided. It's not a sign of something wrong. It's just a natural part of living in community with each other. And we need to kind of build our resilience in leaning in those moments of conflict. That has been a really important focus for us. And so we reinforce that from the first day that students arrive, is just trying to normalize conflict and build student skill around having difficult conversations. Our feeling is that the tension and challenge that students have navigating a roommate who won't turn off their alarm clock is not different from the challenges that they have talking about national politics and immigration enforcement. Like, it's overcoming the reticence, the worry about hurting someone's feeling, damaging a relationship, knowing the right thing to say, getting it wrong. Like, all of that stuff shows up at the micro level in these kind of individual interactions, and building stamina and skill around just having that hard conversation at the micro level, we think kind of builds confidence in having those conversations at the macro level. So those are just a couple of ways that we try to do that.
Fantastic. Looks like we have a question from Mike, or a comment from Mike.
Sorry.
Yes. So eating lunch, so I'm off camera, so apologies for that.
No.
So I'm fascinated by the idea of a class that's required, but also that the content changes based on student interest and those sort of things, and how you keep faculty up for teaching that and whatever. So just wonder if you could say a little bit more about that process, like how you plan out the content for that course, quarter after quarter.
I'll
Yeah.
jump in here. And so we were fortunate that living in the house, Luke and I said, we'll teach the course, right? So I guess that's becomes a little of a side endeavor, but it was so tied to the programming that was already happening. It's like, okay, instead of just having this event on a random Thursday night and Monday nights, let's concentrate more of these events in one place and time. And then because of our familiarity with residents, we were able to incorporate some of their experience. It's like, wow, you did an internship with this organization that works with school boards. Why don't we have a session on school boards and think about what that means for policy and governance and bring that student in, giving them a leadership experience to speak to the class, helping relate the content to their peers, and making sure it's topical, timely. So I think those are kinds of things that happen. Also, if there is a speaker on campus coming from something else, like, oh, they're having a conversation about clean energy. Would that speaker be able to come and drop by our house in our class and connect with us there, or find some other connection in that way? So definitely trying not to make things too hard or unwieldy, but also be timely. We're very open to suggestions, and students seem to love it. There are some readings that we revisit time and time again, but it's actually really fun to be able to share things that are top of mind for us with students.
Yep, I love
I'll
it.
just share
Thanks.
a couple other quick ways that we generate some ideas for that. One of Kemi's responsibilities as a graduate fellow was to meet individually with all 78 students within the first month or so of residence. And as part of that kind of intake meeting, she was getting a lot of data on the kinds of things that motivate and are of interest to our students, and that could then inform some of our thinking about our programming. Second, the last class session, so week 10 of every quarter, is a kind of looking forward. And the basic prompt that we use to start that conversation is, what are the conversations that we need to have but aren't having? Like, just, in anything related to the theme, what's the stuff that we haven't dug into that we need to? And at that point, week 10, it's often a little late to to fully integrate it in the next quarter because we've had to get started before week 10. But we are able to have that then to hold as we move forward. So we always go back to that list to make and use that as a way to then think about sessions that we have. We call in a lot of favors with people kind of in our broader network. Most, I'd say, especially winter and spring, probably 60 to 70% of the sessions are with community leaders who we invite in to kind of share about their work. We sometimes offer an honorarium. Actually, often, if it's a community leader, we offer them an honorarium to just in gratitude for their time. And make sure that we pitch that in a way that they see some value add for them. Often for our community leaders, it's the opportunity to introduce Stanford students to their organizations and their work. And that's helpful. That serves their mission. And so it's worth their time. But we do try to think about how to make sure that that feels not extractive, but supportive of the work that an organization does. So another way we do that is to try to pair an organization that visits and tells us about their work and pathways with a direct service experience with that organization later that quarter, so that it's an opportunity for us to both learn about and then contribute back to the organizations who give of their time to share with us.
Fantastic. Kimmy, Luke, thank you so much. We're going to pivot to Utah Valley University with Cassie and Summer. As folks can tell, there's hours of conversations worth having here. So hopefully this is a good teaser and a prelude to the Pathways framework. Summer and Cassie, please take it away.
Great. My name is Summer Valenci. I'm a professional in residence, faculty member in the School of Business in the Organizational Leadership Department, and I'm the former director of the Center for Social Impact.
Hi, and I'm Cassie Bingham. I am the current director of the Center for Social Impact, but I worked as the assistant director under Summer, where we worked together during, the writing of our chapter. But yeah, happy to be here.
Yeah, so this is a quick rundown of what we're going to cover in our segment. And really, I said the word framework here, but I should have put the word model. So we're going to talk about our early social impact education model, and honestly, how it kind of was our strategic foundation as well. Cassie will go into what our expanded model looks like now and the current practice at the Center for Social Impact. And then I'll do a quick wrap up of how we're using some of these tools in the hospitality management program. So I wanted to start with our starting point. That's actually the title of our chapter. And I wanted to give you a little bit of context to where we sit, both in the country and here at UVU. So UVU is an integrated university and community college. We're located in Orem, Utah, with a very politically and socially conservative community and a politically and socially conservative state. We are the largest public university in the state with enrollment of almost 49,000 students. And UVU has had a long-standing commitment to serving the needs of the community. And the Center for Social Impact has been part of that for over 30 years at this point. So we began as volunteer services in 1993. It was a formal department, but very much focused on direct service and getting students just involved in that way. In 2001, we became the Volunteer and Service Learning Center, and that included establishing a formal partnership with Academic Affairs. The Center for Social Impact sits in Student Affairs at UVU. And then in in 2016, I found the Pathways Framework at a Campus Compact Pre-Con. So those are very important. Literally changed my career. And being exposed to the Pathways Framework, we really started to think about how we could expand our mission and what we do. And so a few years and a few hundred conversations later, we became the Center for Social Impact. And I'm really excited for Cassie to show you the Center for Social Impact's current expanded social impact model. But I want to show you where we started, and that really is what we cover in our chapter. So this is where we started. And really at the time, we did not think that we were developing an educational model at all. The pathways were literally our strategic foundation. So I'd found the pathways at the Pre-Con. At the Volunteer and Service Learning Center, we also were involved with a nonprofit organization called Breakaway, and they used the active citizens continuum in their work. And so the beginning of our framework was putting together the pathways of social impact and the active citizen continuum with really the intent of providing programming and opportunity for students to kind of get into these entry points of the pathways and then progress to getting into more substantial community learning and impact experiences. So that's where we started. But as we, sought to provide students with these more advanced experiences and opportunities, we saw that they really needed to build and gain more confidence to take action, especially when they're addressing, these complex social issues. And so we knew that it was our responsibility to provide students with these tools. So not only the pathways forward, but also with tools to help them act strategically, effectively, and as ethically as possible. So Sean, if you could go to the next slide. So we developed what we first called our integrated social impact strategies. And together with the pathways of social impact, this really became the foundation for the Center for Social Impact for many years. And it served us very well. Cassie will speak more to the strategies in the current form of our model. But this was really revolutionary for us and the center. And truly, it was our focus on the pathways that really allowed the Board of Trustees to approve our proposal to become the Center for Social Impact. When we started to make the case to our stakeholders on campus and in the community, we really focused on our roles as educators to teach the how of building strong communities. The pathway framework was really easy for stakeholders to understand, especially because we could point to, we're already doing 2 of these 6. We're doing direct service and we're doing community engaged learning and research through service learning. So it was easy to say, what we want to do is expand. We want to add these 4 additional pathways and continue to offer programming in these areas. And so what we did when we had these conversations was we emphasized these 3 characteristics. If you go to the next slide, Sean, of the pathways framework being interdisciplinary, inclusive of more identities, and not inherently partisan. And I won't spend a lot of time on these points because I'm speaking to an audience that really probably understands this quite well. And we do go into it in the chapter. So I think what I'll do is I'll land on that last piece right there of not inherently partisan, because this was really one of the most important points of our story at UVU, given the community that we live in. So one of the biggest concerns that we repeatedly faced when we were making this strategic shift was that the CSI, the Center for Social Impact, was going to develop and advocate for a particular political agenda. And so we repeatedly tried to demonstrate with using the pathways that we were going to teach students how. We were going to teach them how they can make an impact in the community. We were not going to tell them what to do. And honestly, being in Utah, that was critical. And we knew it was important to get approval to do what we wanted to do, to expand into this area. But this last year proved that that was exceptionally critical. Over the past year, by state statute, UVU has watched the LGBTQ center close, the multicultural center close. Sorry. And even our Women's Success Center. Obviously, you can tell I care about this. But the Center for Social Impact is still standing, and Cassie is beautifully leading it through this really stormy time. And I'm absolutely positive that our foundation in the pathways is what has kept us through that. So Cassie's going to speak to how what they're currently doing in the Center for Social Impact, and also kind of the pivot that she's had to take to move into more micro ways of social impact, kind of away from some of the macro ways that we used to talk about it. But she's been able to do that within the framework and the model that we've developed. And so take it away, Cassie. Sorry.
Thanks so much, Summer, and never say sorry. Obviously, I think so many on this call can resonate with the deep emotion that is behind this. And so, as we talk about these frameworks, we talk about frameworks all the time as educators, but I can't express how, Summer just did express how profound the Pathways framework has been for our trajectory in a really complicated and nuanced landscape, in a socio-political landscape. So just jumping directly from where Summer left off, as we decided to really focus on the how of social change work, we had so many discussions about where the pathways fit in, whether, how to create programming within the pathways. And one of the discussions we kept coming back to over and over was that the pathways framework, yes, is inherently nonpartisan, and it's a neutral framework, but that doesn't mean that you can't do bad work within the pathways, right? And so even though we keep the pathways framework neutral, that doesn't mean that we don't help students develop a ethical framework to work within the pathways. And so we talked a lot about that, right? We did have our integrated social impact strategies, that Summer showed the early kind of rendition of that we've now had to call social change design. It actually used to be called equity-centered design, but according to that same law that Summer just talked about, we're now no longer allowed to use the word equity as a center under student affairs in Utah. And so it's now called social change design. But we wanted to take a step back and say, what does it look like to guide students, give them a toolbox to help them know how to engage in each of the pathways in a way that would be ethical, sustainable, effective, long-term effective. And so we first really focused on strategy, strategic tools. As you can see, if you're familiar at all with user experience design, you can see that those steps of the design thinking process are included there. And then layered on top of those are best practices within social change work, including systems thinking, theory of change, and impact measurement across those steps. But even as we started to really dive into those strategic pieces, we realized we had to take one step back even more. And this is speaking to what Kemi and Luke just so beautifully articulated due to the question about ideological pluralism and the challenges of getting students there, and the challenges of just living in a world, in a society in our country right now where we don't have socio-political leaders who are showing students how to engage with one another in relationally ethical ways. We realize that if students are going to be ethically strategic in order to ethically engage within the pathways, they have to develop relational skills. And unfortunately, we're in a society right now where students aren't necessarily coming into higher education with those relational skills. So we kind of had those conversations about, as a Center for Social Impact, using the Pathways framework and teaching strategic tools, is it our place to talk about relationality and relational skills? But we ultimately decided that we have to. That it is part of the strategy inherently to helping students engage ethically across the pathways of social impact or of public service. And so you can see that we also have a relational framework called relational care. Luke kind of spoke to something similar here, where we teach relational skills at multiple tiers. At the self tier, which often looks like emotional regulation and resilience. And then at the interpersonal, communal, and systemic tiers. So we talk a lot about conflict and healthy conflict. We talk a lot about communication. We talk a lot about coalition building. We talk a lot about consensus and compromise and ethical forms of governance and decision making. And so we have trainings that we teach across all of those tiers. Sean, if you move forward just really quickly, I can give a closer look at each of these. So that's the relational care framework. We maintained kind of the ethical guide that we've been using all throughout the 30 years of the center, when it was the volunteer center, when it was the volunteer and service learning, which is do no harm, right? We engage in the world and first do no harm, which can lead to so many fruitful ethical conversations around white saviorism or around, the power dynamics at play, around exploitation, around extraction, etc. But we did add on top of this these layers of relational spheres to help kind of guide students in understanding all of the different places where their relational skills will come into play. On the next slide, you can see more closely this social change design framework. And again, systems thinking as the first two steps of the design process when designing a social intervention for social problems. And then using theory of change or theory of systems change even on the doing and the hypothesis and doing and testing steps, the prototyping steps of the design process, and then actually teaching best practices of impact measurement and assessment, of course, to help with the evaluation steps of the design process and then recycling and reiterating. As you can see in that first slide, these are set across a continuum that we just call the strategic impact continuum. And the pathways are at the end because they are where you then collaborate, right, across sectors and cross-disciplinary disciplines due to having those relational skills and then those strategic tools as your toolkit for engaging across these. And we say collaborate, right, because students may end up working in primarily in one or two pathways, but they inevitably will have to brush shoulders with other pathways to be engaged in effective social impact work. The active citizen continuum that Summer brought up, we still use a version of that just internally with our assessment process to help us assess how students are engaging in our programming and if that is helping them become pathways-oriented social impact leaders. So the Center for Social Impact really is a hub for students to come learn, engage, and lead in creating positive social impact outcomes. We define social impact as significant positive change that's community identified, and that is effective and sustainable and ethical in the way that it's carried out. And we do exhibits, we do applied research, we do experiential leadership fellowships for students, and some events programming as well. Thanks for the sticker shout out. We love our stickers. We have like 20 stickers we've designed. Okay, so if you go to the next slide, I can tell you a little bit about our programming. Some of this is very similar to what Kemi and Luke described. We have some, although we are located in student affairs, we have a long-standing relationship with academic affairs, thanks to Summer's work when she developed a partnership there. And so we have some curricular offerings, including just barely, we launched a social impact minor in partnership with the Woodbury Business School, where Summer is a professional in residence. And so we have a minor that includes a social impact frameworks class that goes over the pathways in combination with those strategic frameworks as well. The systems thinking and theory of change and impact measurement across the design cycle. And then some ethical leadership courses are also required in that minor. Students can choose to do it as a minor or a certificate. We also do have a social impact seminar, which is a 1-credit pathways course, and it sounds very, very similar to what Luke and Kemi are doing. The nice thing about being the Center for Social Impact and located in student affairs with a team of full-time staff is that we have a staff member who's completely dedicated to community partnerships. We have over 60 nonprofit organizations and some social enterprises as well who are official partners with the center, and we often draw from them for our guest lectures and things like that in our Pathways course. We also have partnered with the Social Work Master's Program to provide macro social impact strategy classes for their macro social work, both for systems and design thinking. So you can see that we have, multiple curricular offerings. And then because we are a center within student affairs, we have extracurricular offerings as well. And you can see that includes pathways workshops that we invite students to. We do competitions in systems and design thinking that still include pathways because we have to help students understand that cross-sectoral collaboration. And then we have student leadership positions, student impact fellows. And if you go to the next slide, I'll just give a very quick example of a couple of the ways these students are engaging with the pathways. 6 of our fellows are Pathways Fellows who work in our center. And they do a monthly report called the Pathways Post that goes out to all of our community partners and then others who have subscribed to this report. Each of them does a full report within their pathway, shadowing and doing an immersive experience with a partner that practices the pathway that they represent. And then also doing polling and interview qualitative research with students, and then also sometimes with community members. And then doing some type of research project on some type of relevant discourse within their pathway. And so that's a really great way if you want to subscribe. We can provide Sean with that subscription link so you can kind of see that example. And then finally, if you go to the next one, you can see that we have the pathways up on the front wall of our center. So that people know immediately that, like Summer said, this is kind of a message to stakeholders in our community that we teach across these pathways. And we incorporate them into all of our programming. Down in the corner, you can see my employee getting ready for alternative spring break trips. And on those trips, each of those trips is tagged with one or more pathways. And the community partners that they work with and everything are practicing within the pathways that those trips are themed with. And so students engage with experiential learning opportunities within the pathways in that way as well.
Sorry, we can just very briefly. I employ design thinking and the relationality piece that Cassie spoke to in my hospitality strategic management course that I teach. It's a writing enriched course. I teach it online and in person, two separate classes. And the big kind of takeaway from that is I designed a strategic design challenge, which is a semester long, or I just am finishing a block long strategy simulation. And so, Sean, could you go 2 slides in advance? One more. And so that challenge is just, you can just see how it's been developed. Kind of the strategic practices that I'm hoping that they do throughout the class, including like using strategic levers to diagnose systems level issues. You can see where those pieces of the design thinking, the systems thinking, the theory of change, the impact measurement, that all comes through. But this is a challenge that they go through. I actually taught my last strategy or design thinking piece of my class last night, and it went really well, and it's been really cool to kind of see how it's worked out. And if you do one more slide, I also teach this book called Unreasonable Hospitality, and this is where we speak about the relational aspects. I actually term this section of the class as relational strategy, because without having these relationships, especially in the hospitality sector that I'm speaking to specifically, we can't do our work. And I'm very intentional too about not just speaking about the people that we're working with, but the people that we are managing. So not just guests, but the people that we're working with. We talk about emotional labor, unseen labor, all those things. And so really critical part to what we talk about in class. And that's it.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much. I know we're right at time, but if folks have a few minutes, Cassie, Summer, do you have a couple minutes? If folks want to have questions, we can run a little bit over. Obviously, no concern if folks need to take off. But any questions, comments, reactions for UVU?
Hi, I was wondering if you could say a little bit more about how you measure the impact, kind of that assessment piece.
Yeah, for sure. We are I wish I would have gotten a image for our updated active citizen continuum, because we call it, I think, the social change leader continuum now. But we basically have a range similar to what Summer showed. If you want to go back to that, Sean, possibly the active citizen side, there's a range of like engagement levels, right, for our students that go all the way from kind of being like an apathetic, just like member of society, kind of moving through the world to having experiences where they're finally kind of like asking more like why questions about, why is the world this way? Why do things occur this way? And then to becoming like active in, oh, I have some agency, I have some autonomy to act within this. And then finally, in our updated version, to becoming some form of leader. And we define that in not just in terms of like a formalized leader in a team setting, but like somebody who leads out. And so I don't have the updated image here, and my assistant director is the one who leads out our assessment strategy. But they've developed basically a matrix across our updated version that tracks to our programming. And we do a series of pre and post surveys with our student leaders, who are doing experiential projects. Some of them are doing impact consulting projects using systems and design thinking. Some, like the one example I gave, are doing pathways reporting, where they're literally going out and doing immersive experiences with pathways community partners and then reporting on that. And so we're pre and post surveying those students, but then we also have lower stakes surveying and some focus groups that we're doing with students who have attended our like pathways workshops or been involved in our pathways 1 credit course. And so that's what it's looking like right now. But because these frameworks are so young, our assessment strategy is also a little bit young. So we're continuing to build it out.
Thank you.
Wonderful. As you can tell, again, these both could have been their own hour workshop and many, many, many more conversations to be had. Um, thank you, everyone, for sharing even more than an hour with us today. I will just quickly say Summer's promotion of pre-conference was not a paid promotion. And if folks are attending Compact 26, we will have a Pathways pre-conference. Great chance to connect with folks that are using the framework and folks that are interested in the framework. We have more webinars in store where you found this one if you are interested. And I'll just quickly say thank you. If you don't have a copy of the book, you can use Path 20 and get a discount. We're actively trying to get every campus library in the country to have a copy so that students can have free access to it. And yeah, thanks again for being here. And welcome any follow-up questions. Hope to see you all soon.